Various emulation websites, Yuzu, Citra, Relic Castle, they have all been attacked by the big companies trying to shut them down. So the Pokemon Company and Nintendo, more notably, have been very adamant about taking down, emulating, distributing of ROMs, fan games, all that. And they certainly have succeeded to a certain degree. Now, this isn't anything new or anything. Nintendo has been very vocal about not appreciating emulation, but there has been a spike in recent months. So I'll just briefly describe the three situations I want to talk about. So first of all, the website I'm talking about that was distributing ROMs. They are distributing ROMs for older consoles, not PlayStation 4, not Nintendo Switch, not PlayStation 5, but mostly older consoles. And they have received a DMCA strike for distributing one of them. I'm assuming it's probably a Nintendo one, even though they didn't disclose what company gave them the DMCA strike, but I'm assuming it's Nintendo. Then the Relic Castle one is a very weird one to me, as it was essentially a Pokemon community hub. It was the hub for finding cool fan games, which isn't even illegally distributing official Pokemon games. It's expanding on the arsenal of games. If I play and beat Scarlet and Violet, I'm like, I gotta wait until 2025 for Pokemon Legends, whatever. What's it called? XZ? ZY? I don't fucking care, bro. You can play these fan games with original ideas. Like, there's a huge community, a huge fan base that uses ROM hacking tools to make cool ass fan games and essentially keep that Pokemon fire burning inside of me. Sometimes even having much better ideas than the Pokemon Company and Game Freak themselves. And they have recently received a DMCA strike, and they have been forced to shut the website down until further notice. And that is fucking crazy to me, because they're not even distributing original Nintendo and the Pokemon Company products. And then the Yuzu case is a bit of a special one. Yuzu and Citra are a Nintendo Switch and 3DS emulator made by the same group of people. And they have received a very, very big DMCA strike from Nintendo. And Nintendo went as far as threatening a lawsuit, and they were so fucking scared because they had made mistakes that they settled on a $2.4 million fine and deleting everything they've used to build and develop the emulators. Now, the reason I'm addressing Yuzu and Citra last is because it's a bit of a special case. Yuzu and its development team, they made a very, very big mistake. They did not play by the book. They didn't just develop a Nintendo Switch emulator, which is a current day console, but they paywalled a bunch of it and made a bunch of other mistakes that ultimately got Nintendo to bite. And I still think Nintendo attacked them, harassed them, to set an example for future future groups of people trying to develop emulators for current day consoles. However, emulation isn't illegal. This is a precedent set by Nintendo, like, look what can happen if you do this and this. But this is not something that applies to every single group of people emulating. What Yuzu did was very dumb. For example, one of the things they did is they collected anonymous data about what games were played the most and where games would crash, which is essentially a bit of a invasion of privacy. I don't think other emulators do this, correct me if I'm wrong. But that's not even the biggest mistake. It's a minor decision they made. What ultimately got them fucked were two things. One, they made new Nintendo Switch games playable a day before release, which is very fucking stupid. Let me be honest here. Now let me clarify. They just made them playable. They never actually distributed ROMs themselves, as far as I know, and as far as I could read on the interwebs. But still, when you're making games playable days before release or on release date, that's definitely gonna get Nintendo alarmed, and ultimately get them to harass you. They can prove the games were illegally obtained and how they made them work before the intended release date, which is really bad. But I don't even think that is necessarily what got Nintendo's attention. I think Yuzu crossed the line when they started explaining users how to pirate games. Yuzu started saying a bunch of shit about how to get decryption keys or show all of these games that haven't been released yet. They showed all of them being emulated, and that requires pirating those games and or obtaining them illegally. And if they weren't boasting about all that and telling people how to fucking emulate shit, it wouldn't have given Nintendo a reason to sue them. I think emulating games, whichever release date of tomorrow, isn't very optimal for not being sued. And what's even worse is how they paywalled it. They, for example, Tears of the Kingdom, the newest Zelda game which released late last year, they had that game weeks before it was actually released. The Tears of the Kingdom build leaked, and the Yuzu devs, made sure the emulator worked and Tears of the Kingdom was actually playable. And they paywalled that. They didn't distribute Tears of the Kingdom itself, but they paywalled the early access build, which would be able to emulate Tears of the Kingdom early. And that is really fucking stupid. And it took the center stage in Nintendo's lawsuit. Them stating there were apparently 1 million downloads of Tears of the Kingdom early and played on the Yuzu emulator, which to no one's surprise saw their Patreon earnings shoot up like skyrocket. And that's essentially what Nintendo caught them on. And essentially what Yuzu did is stole code from Ryujinx, which is another huge emulation type platform, and then they paywalled it. So if you wanted to play the Yuzu emulator, if you wanted to play the new games, you had to pay for it. And that's where the legal battle was lost, ultimately. Nintendo can prove you're paywalling something that isn't yours, and thus you're fucked. And that's why Yuzu didn't even go to court when they were sued. They basically settled with the $2.4 million fine, which is gonna be very hard to pay, even with the, I think I read somewhere they received $30,000 per month from customers of Yuzu, but that $2.4 million fine is gonna be very hard to pay. But they didn't want to go to court because they knew they would lose it. They knew they had nothing going for them. They paywalled something that wasn't theirs. And they just didn't want to fight Nintendo's endless money. It's sad. Like, Yuzu made mistakes. And now they had to bite the bullet for other forms of emulation. It's truly, even if Yuzu made mistakes, it's truly a power and dominance type of move from Nintendo. Like, setting an example for what could happen. if you emulate as well. They're trying to scare other people away from doing so, and I think that's really fucking bad. But yeah, in the end, they try to make money off of emulation, and that's fucking dumb, because you will get caught by the big companies. But the problem I have with all of this, not just the Yuzu and Citra emulation situation, with everything, the problem is Nintendo just needed a reason to be able to fucking attack them and take them down, because they just don't want things to be emulated. And I just don't understand why companies feel this way. So essentially what happens when big companies make a power move like this is video game preservation is harmed. Like, the Yuzu guys also made Citra, and as far as I'm concerned, Citra didn't have a paywall. Citra is a 3DS emulator, and when Yuzu was taken down, they forced them to take Citra down as well and stop all development on it. What is the fucking reason? These 3DS games were made specifically for 3DS. And those games aren't even sold anymore. Nor are its fucking games sold in any type of way. Because you know, the goddamn 3DS eShop was killed. So how can you even obtain 3DS ROMs? How can you even play 3DS games? 3DS isn't sold anymore, the games aren't sold anymore in any way, shape or form. So now all you can do is buy physicals from the other consumers, making Nintendo $0. The consumer is the loser here in every sense of the word, because the fucking supply and demand type of relationship will get worse and worse, thus making the consumer overpay more and more. And Nintendo has no intent on re-releasing these games, and even if they did, they were made with 3DS mechanics in mind. So you'll need a whole ass new system to mimic or make an alternative version, which is just never the same. And even if I'm using 3DS as an example, this isn't just about the 3DS. The emulation websites that got killed off as well have the exact same thing. PSP games, Game Boy games, Nintendo DS games, all that. If maybe 1% is re-released, then it's a lot. And the rest, if you're just fighting emulation, the rest is just killed off and the consumer can never fucking play it anymore. It's so fucking dumb, because if you wanna obtain physicals and do it the legal way, shit becomes just expensive as hell. Or even extinct when there's no new options available. And you need to own the console as well. I do not own a PSP, but I love PSP games. So I'll have to search the internet for a used PSP or whatever, and if I want the games then I'll have to search the internet again, pay way too much money, all that. It's stupid. It's fucking stupid. And you know what's worse? Let's take the Wii for example. Like, I own a Wii. But if I didn't own a Wii, then I would probably have to pay a lot for all these fucking accessories, because some games are unplayable without those accessories. And even that has its limits. And not to mention, cartridges eventually break down, CDs stop working, and in theory that could mean entire games disappearing from the world. Forever. Sure, it'll take a long time, but you know. And we know exactly what losing work looks like, and because it's happened throughout history. So I'm just genuinely wondering, what do companies gain from striking these websites and emulators down? Like, what do they gain? You gain nothing from getting people to buy for hundreds, maybe even thousands in some cases, from a bunch of resellers on eBay. It's nothing but anti-consumer practice. But you know, let's play devil's advocate here. They want to take a game down because, oh, you should have paid for it when it was actually being sold. So let's take Darkspore for example. It's a looter game by EA, and it was an online looter game. So you needed an online service to be played. And you even needed an online service to be activated to play offline. This is because the game ran on an always online DRM service, even if you wanted to play offline. And then the game also needed to verify with a server before it would even start up. Now, you probably already know what's coming. Those servers have been offline since 2016. And thus Darkspore was killed along with it. Or let's take any multiplayer focused games, maybe even old Super Smash Bros. Iterations. Those games need multiplayer in order to even function. Well, there's of course the single player mode, but you play Super Smash for the online mode. Now, for example, I own Super Smash for the Wii. I think it's just Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And if I wanted to play online, well, that is impossible, because there is no Wii Online anymore. Like, multiplayer games are of course a different kind of example. They have a host of new challenges for those wishing to preserve them. Maybe even having to create new and better online servers to even make the games function to 100%. And I mean, I understand it from a company. As the years go by, and more people may leave a game behind because there's better newer games, and thus decreasing the player base of a game and maybe even a console. It's only logical that the developer and or publisher may choose to start shutting down servers for the game to save on money spent. But then, why are you getting angry when people try to basically revive it? Now, there's an argument to be made that, hey, we're intending to remake or remaster a video game. I mean, sure, whatever, if that's your reason for taking it down. I understand there's people that understand them taking stuff down if they're intending to remake or remaster something. But even then, it's different. I think the best example here I could think of is Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Pokemon Diamond and Pokemon Pearl, you can only play those on DS. I don't think they have been re-released on anything in their original form, and the only way to legally obtain them is either spending way too much money on eBay or whatever. I never buy used games really. The only way to legally play these games is to purchase the remakes on Nintendo Switch. Now, I'm gonna be honest here, I'm not a huge fan of these remakes. I don't really like the style in which it all was created, and I much prefer the vibes and atmosphere of the originals. But if I go by the Pokemon Company and ultimately Nintendo's playbook, I'm not allowed to play those original games. If you want the original experience, you're just fucked, and I think that's unfair. Sure, you can remake and or remaster a game, but what if the fans want the original experience, and that experience isn't even obtainable, isn't even achievable in a legal way? That is where emulation is fair, in my opinion. I think the 3DS example I gave earlier is perfect for that. If there's 3DS games getting remade or remastered for the Nintendo Switch or maybe even other consoles, you'll have to completely adjust everything about the game. It played on 2 screens, it had the 3DS's mechanics in mind, so you'll have to fuck with the code and make everything much different, thus meddling with the original experience. and making that experience unobtainable by striking down all these websites and emulators. It's fucking wrong, man. Why do you only want the new experience to be playable, instead of giving the players the authentic experience that you and me experienced all those years ago? Let's say you're born like post 2005 and you were unable to obtain any of the early Pokemon games, and you like the Game Boy Color or Game Boy and you want to play those games. Then they're just saying, well, here's my middle finger, bitches. You're not allowed to play it because you can't obtain it legally. So you're getting fucked by not being born early. Like, that's so fucking stupid, dude. If you want the original experience, I feel like emulating is fair. In fact, I'd say if you get to play the old-ass authentic version of a game, you might even be motivated to pay for the new experience, to see what changed, what quality of life updates or downgrades. I'd say it can even gain these companies money. And then there's the age-old argument for emulation makes sense when the console is old, but for the current one, it's so wrong. I agree to a certain extent. I think there's arguments for both sides. Emulating a console that has games on the market as we speak, I definitely say that costs companies a bit of money, but also imagine liking video games but growing up in a very poor family, and you don't have money to pay 60 to 70 to maybe even more for Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5 games, and you want to play those games, and emulation is your way to do so, your only way to do so. And maybe when you finish school, get a steady job, whatever, maybe then you can actually play and pay for those games. Even then, I guess emulating makes you fall in love with video games and thus purchase actual video games when you're older. I guess that's an argument which is a bit far-fetched, but I understand it for current consoles, is what I'm saying. I understand DMCA strikes, I understand them getting angry over Nintendo Switch games being emulated while they're still on the market and they can still make money off of it. But I'm not against emulators being developed for a console when the console is still new. And my reason for this is because eventually the Switch will become an old console, and thus all the work put into i.e. Yuzu can't come back if it's being taken down. It takes years for these for these consoles to develop, for these emulators to develop. Citra, before it was taken down earlier this year, it was far from perfect, and like the 3DS was discontinued 2017, I think, 7 years ago. The emulator still isn't perfect. That's how much work it takes to get these things up and running. And I think putting the work in early while the console is still new, I value that. Because it means when a console is discontinued and we're moving on to the next one, the better one, we have an alternative to play these fucking video games that won't be sold anymore and definitely won't be remade. I definitely think that is worth something, and luckily I've seen a bunch of platforms taking over Yuzu's development and source code and all that, and hopefully the emulator will be improved upon and further developed, because otherwise the effort is back to square one. And how are we gonna play Switch games? I really hope the fucking lawsuits don't discourage people from doing this type of shit, because it's so important for video game preservation. But then again, I think there should be, but there never will be, I think there should be like ethical rules to not distribute Switch games while they're still on the market. it's different with it's definitely different with other games that are old and not distributed anymore, 3DS, Game Boy, Nintendo DS, GameCube, all that. But with current console games that I can still purchase right the fuck now, I understand people defending Nintendo and TPCi, the Pokemon company, for doing what they do best, fucking with people. But what I will never understand is the Relic Castle situation. To me, it's a special kind of stupid. Like, Relic Castle was DMCA'd by a company that was... What did the message say again? They made a public statement. I think it was a company allowed by the Pokemon company to DMCA websites and all that for distributing Pokemon related type of stuff. And their reasoning for DMCA striking is they're using assets and Pokemon and stuff they made to basically distribute new and different type of games. So what they're saying is, hey, you see this fucking mock model?
Yeah, that's ours. You can use that.
And I think that's so fucking dumb, bro. Fan games are even different than distributing the original ROMs. I think that's even further from being illegal than distributing like PlayStation 2 ROMs. Fan games are often made like from scratch, using original DS and Game Boy assets often. Not even, they barely even make 3DS type HD ROM hacks of Pokemon games. It's mostly on DS and Game Boy. And sure, they are using the assets, but they're using it to create an entire new and original adventure. And I think having such a dedicated fanbase and community to keep the game alive when you're slacking on the job for I don't know how many years now, making broken ass games with garbage ass graphics. I think it's beyond stupid to try to axe those type of websites, creators, all that. For me personally, if it wasn't for stuff like Pokemon Showdown and ROM hacks with difficulty hacks, original stories, even non-Pokemon but using Pokemon assets type adventures, I don't think my love and burning fire, that sounds so stupid, whatever, I'm going with it. I don't think that would be as strong as it is today. I still enjoy Pokemon a lot. I enjoy its core mechanics and all that. But I'll be honest, I think ROM hacks and Pokemon Showdown are much more interesting than the original adventures Game Freak and the Pokemon Company deliver. And yet, because those adventures are so interesting to me, I still buy the new Pokemon games. I think without these communities making these cool ass ROM hacks, like they're not all good, but most of them are. Well, some of them are. 50%. I think that's so important for keeping a game series alive. Pokemon would not have as much longevity if it wasn't for the fans making so many cool original adventures and keeping people interested in Pokemon as a whole. I don't think it has enough staying power, to me at least, to do that on its own. And taking that down, all that hard work, it's dumb. And taking that down, it doesn't even make you more money. I honestly refuse to believe taking down ROM hacks will make people buy your original fucking games. Like, what's on the market right now? Probably Legends, Arceus, Scarlet Violet, Sword Shield, Mystery Dungeon DX, and then in a year or so, the new Legends game. So that's a couple games, but taking down ROM hacks, why would I buy? Who the fuck's gonna be like, oh no, the ROM hacks I wanted to play are taken down. So let me now... Yeah, I'm gonna buy those games off the Switch eShop or physically. I think that's logical, man. I think, yeah, I should buy them now. Like, they've taken down something that people were making $0 on. Like, free fucking ROM hacks made out of passion. And that's really bad for the people that put so many hours into it. Yeah, I should buy their games now. Yeah, they did such a good thing for the... No, of course not! Goddamn fucking Pokemon Company fucking idiots. Like, I genuinely don't understand what's going on in the offices of these fucking companies taking down, well, ROM hacks and original ROMs of PS2 and I don't know. These companies do not understand. Hobbyists, consumers, and preservationists are in fact paying customers. I would have never gotten into The Legend of Heroes if it wasn't for being able to emulate Nayuta no Kaseki, aka Nayuta Boundless Trails. I played that thing when it was just a Japanese exclusive and only had a fan translation on PSP. I played that shit for free. And now I've bought Trails in the Sky first chapter, I've already purchased second chapter, and like I'm currently making a video on first chapter and even though it will probably not do very well on my channel, it is free advertising. There's a couple people watching my channel and if they are like, oh, I like JRPGs, then you're making even more money. That never would have happened if I wasn't able to emulate it. And sure, you can basically make the argument, oh, but it was a Japanese exclusive at the time. And it's no different for games that do actually have a fucking localization. I am currently making a video on Samurai Jack games. There's only 3 of them, but that's not the point. I bought the Samurai Jack Adult Swim game, which is also being taken down in a little bit, by the way, because Warner Bros. Has decided keeping the Adult Swim brand alive isn't worth it anymore. It's basically this fucking guy, I forgot what Zaslav is his name, I think. This fucking guy only cares about money. And he's like, the Adult Swim brand isn't making money anymore, so he's killing it and killing all the games distributed with it. I'm not even gonna get into that because that's another 15 to 20 minute segment. But I bought that Samurai Jack Adult Swim game for about $34. And all because of being able to emulate the GBA and PlayStation 2 entry. Emulating doesn't lose money. I think emulating stuff makes people interested in buying the new stuff. And I think there's never gonna be any type of research that can confirm this, but I'm 100% positive that emulating is a net positive, and I don't even think it's close to breaking even. I think it's a big net positive. Without emulation, I would have never gotten into so many series I now care about, because of being able to try it for free, rather than a $60 paywall. And these fucking companies do not understand that. And I think that's what I want to leave it at. The main things to take away from this is keep fucking emulating. I think video game preservation is hella important. Video games, no matter the year, no matter the time, no matter the group of people, they are made with the effort of many or very few individuals, and I think they deserve a part in history that is still accessible. Like films, video games tell us about the cultural expression of humanity through the lens of video games. And these big companies like TPCi and Nintendo axing it and thus failing to preserve video games and thus preventing the preservation of video games. It risks losing a chapter development of video games, of human history, especially as video games become more and more popular with the general public. And I think the people creating these emulators, taking the risk of making websites to distribute old ROMs, releasing source code, all that type of stuff, I think it's admirable. And it is what has to be done to ensure people born in 2024 can enjoy games of the early 2000s like we did when we were younger, even though they were never around during its release. It is completely wrong to be punished for not being born when a video game was released and then not getting to play an old game that Nintendo or any other company refuses to re-release. And I think these companies can make claims that they are planning to re-release game A and B and even say maybe we will re-release it one day. But if it's like a franchise that sold 10,000 units tops, what is there to gain from re-releasing it? There isn't. It's gonna cost more money than it will gain you. And thus, it will stay hidden in one of those older consoles forever. And that is why emulation is perfect for it. Those trash-ass companies that choose to enact destructive policies and that lead to games like those being lost forever, they only deserve the worst, in my opinion. Without video game preservation, a lot of people would not get hooked onto whatever franchise. A lot of people would not care about video games as much and maybe even try other franchises. I think emulating certain games for free, for whatever reason you're choosing to do so, to try it because you have no money, whatever, and that can make you a fan of a bunch of video games and spend a bunch of money in the future. I think emulating truly makes sure a snowball effect can happen. And I think in most cases it does in fact happen. Being able to download video games back when I was 8 years old or some shit, play it on my DS, on my R4 card, for free. Would I have been such a massive video game fan if I wasn't able to do that? Would I have spent that much money on video games and dedicate 2 channels to making videos on video games? No, I would not have. So I'd like to end this video by saying fuck Nintendo, fuck TPCi, fuck every fucking company trying to axe emulation. It is far more important than you fucking stupid fucks will ever understand.